Welcome back to our Halloween Horror Mayhem special, where we delve deep into all kinds of different horror movies. And because today is Halloween, I've picked something special for you. Last year on this day I talked about my favorite horror movie of all time, David Cronenberg's The Fly. And today I talk about my second favorite horror movie of all time, the one with this iconic tagline: "What happened is true. Now the motion picture that's just as real." Servus Freunde, my name is Jimmy Cage, and despite me quoting the iconic tagline of the poster, actually one of two iconic taglines, what happened isn't actually true. Like Fargo, The Blair Witch Project, or quite a few older exploitation movies, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre isn't an account of a true story. But that the opening text scroll very news-like points to the opposite surely puts the audience in the right spot to enjoy the film even more. According to director and co-writer Tobe Hooper, this intentional misinformation was a direct response to the feeling, or rather fact, that the government was lying about things that were going on all over the world at that time. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre was released in 1974, right after the Watergate scandal and in the atmosphere of the Vietnam War and all of its atrocities. Now, you could say that the iconic slasher villain Leatherface is based on the real murderer Ed Gein, the so-called Butcher of Plainfield, who committed his crimes in the 1950s Wisconsin and also inspired other horror films such as Psycho and The Silence of the Lambs. But the similarities are rather slim and doesn't make the Texas Chainsaw Massacre a true story at all. But what it is, it's an absolute horror masterpiece and one of the most influential films of the genre. It is a super atmospheric, terrifying, gruesome, shocking and disturbing film that has a physical effect on you while watching, and probably even after. I still remember very vividly how I saw it for the very first time. It was one of many horror classics that belonged to a very notorious list in Germany. A list that contained all those titles that were banned and confiscated according to paragraph 131 of the German Criminal Code. Paragraph 131 is about the presentation of violence, and Germany had a very strict and, from an artistic perspective, downright embarrassing time towards the end of the last century when it banned several movies. Now, thankfully times have changed, and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre was actually the first film which confiscation was revoked about 10 years ago. Regardless, there were always ways to see those movies anyway. Dawn of the Dead, Brain Dead and Evil Dead being other examples. And sometime around 2002, I guess, I got my hands on a video file off the internet and sat down in front of my old CRT monitor, headphones on, and finally watched what I had heard so much about. And despite being super hyped about it and expecting one of the goriest horror movies of all time, it didn't just live up to my expectations, it surpassed them. I was scared shitless, even though it was fairly different from what I assumed. From a movie that has Chainsaw Massacre in its title, you expect a lot of bloody violence. The German title, which is its own thing of beauty, even includes the word BLUTGERICHT in Texas, meaning blood meal in Texas. And if you're wondering how they came up with that strange poster, this still photo of the entire family posing was just meant as a gag, and of course that scene isn't anywhere in the film. The photo was apparently stolen from the set by a visiting German reporter who took it back to West Germany, and there it became the official poster. But back on topic. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre is really not that bloody at all. Director Tobe Hooper actually intended to make the movie for a PG rating, which is absolutely bonkers in my mind. And of course the ratings board thought so as well and insisted on an X rating first. Because despite not showing that much graphic violence on screen, it's absolutely horrifying, and what is implied gets even more gruesome in your own imagination. It is still one of the most brutal and shocking movies you can find, but it's brutal and shocking without much on-screen bloodshed. For me, it's all about that dense, horrifying, terror-invoking atmosphere, and it's building from the moment the movie starts. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a prime example of what you can accomplish on a low budget. The filmmaking and style has its own unique flavor, and the way the images and the sound design interact is marvelous. Right after that introducing voiceover narration, we just get a black screen and the noises and sounds of what turns out to be gravediggers. There are only a few images flashing up for some brief seconds, revealing some rotten body parts and close-ups, accompanied by the stretched out sound of an old camera flash. We then get to see two decomposed bodies wired to a large monument. The camera slowly moves back to reveal it in its entirety, all while we hear a news report about this gruesome event at a Texas graveyard. It is called a grisly work of art, and that might very well go for the whole film as well. It's only then that we get the opening credits, with the news report continuing over some red and black images and accompanied by the film's crazy soundtrack.
Oil storage units continue to burn out of control at the huge Texaco refinery near the Texas-Louisiana border. 3 storage units exploded into flames during the night, killing at least 3 workers and injuring a dozen more.
This soundtrack is one of the most distinct elements the film has to offer. According to the IMDb trivia, the music, which was composed by Tobe Hooper and Wayne Bell, doesn't contain sounds from actual musical instruments. Instead, they used sounds an animal would hear inside a slaughterhouse. Apart from a few songs that are playing on the radio, the whole soundtrack are just these inharmonious, distorted industrial sounds, and they fit the film and its mood perfectly. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a film about meat, about slaughtering, and putting sounds from a slaughterhouse to it only makes sense. But here it's the human beings that find themselves in a slaughterhouse, finding themselves on meat hooks, in freezers, at the end of sledgehammers and chainsaws. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a film about a group of friends falling victim to a family of cannibalistic psychopaths. Tobe Hooper has said it's about a chain of life and killing sentient beings, and the film has indeed been described as the ultimate pro-vegetarian film due to its subversive animal rights theme. But I guess it's time to talk about the one who's doing all the slaughtering, the one who's based on Ed Gein, the butcher of Plainfield, and yet he's very different and its very own notorious monster, thankfully only fictional. His name is Leatherface and his introduction is perfect. From the very first time we ever see him on screen until the first time he kills someone, it's only about 3 seconds. It's minute 35 in a film that perfectly clocks in at roughly 90 minutes. 2 of the friends, Kirk and Pam, are scouting the area nearby their friend's homestead when they stumble upon a house. When Kirk is entering, he's signed his immediate death warrant. He goes in, Leatherface appears, and it's an instant hammer to the face. It all happens so fast and without any music. Kirk's whole body is fidgeting, then one more blow to the head and Leatherface moves his body to the side and shuts the sliding door. Only then some deep ambient music sets in. It's an iconic movie villain introduction, and the first time I saw this I was shocked. This is also the point where the movie really shifts into dark and terrifying horror stuff. I mean, it was pretty nasty and crazy up until that point, but now it's really upping up the terror. That first murder was only the beginning. The next time that slide door opens is even more gruesome. Leatherface grabs Pam, who was looking for Kirk, and just discovering the horrific and vast piles of bones and skulls, some of them used for decoration. He grabs her and puts her right on a meat hook. Like I said at the beginning, most of the brutality you don't actually see. There's no graphic depiction of that hook entering her back. But what you don't see, you make up in your mind, and it has to be one of the most gruesome and also best scenes in any horror movie. And for the first time, Leatherface is turning on his chainsaw to saw up Kirk right in front of Pam. Again, not in full graphical detail, but that's not necessary. The sheer idea that Tobe Hooper might have thought the movie would be eligible for a PG rating is just madness. Leatherface doesn't talk, he only makes noises, and of course he wears a mask that appears to be made out of skin, which is also the connection to the real killer Ed Gein, who made all sorts of things out of mostly human skin. Leatherface wears 3 masks actually during the film: the killing mask, the old lady mask, and the pretty woman mask, each one highlighting a certain aspect of his personality in that specific scene. That first murder and the abduction of Pam also perfectly demonstrate the filmmaker's ability to create atmosphere. The film is extremely strong in distinguishing between inside and outside. When Kirk and Pam arrive at the house, it's broad daylight, but inside the house everything is filled with shadows and darkness. No one would know what kind of horrors will happen in there, and it creates such a strong and memorable visual identity. Another thing adding to this is the passing of time and how the light and colors are changing from noon to afternoon to darkest night. It also has to be mentioned that the conditions of the shoot are very strongly reflected in what comes across from the screen. The shooting took place during a brutal summer heatwave, and this absolutely transfers into the film's atmosphere. Without spoiling it too much, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre features an infamous dinner scene, basically the finale of the film when our final girl is welcomed to join this insane family. It's pure terror and one of the most intense sequences in any movie. At that point there's yet another member of the family getting introduced, the grandfather. He's played by John Dugan, but under a very thick layer of old age makeup. And at that point of filming the scene, he had been in the makeup for several hours. He also had to wear a heavy suit and necktie, and the whole room was filled with dead animals and rotting food. Of course there were no air conditioning or electric fans either. Now add the hot filming lights to the mix, and if that's still not enough, the scene was also filmed while it was broad daylight outside, which means it's even hotter, and they had to use blackout curtains in front of the windows, which adds another increase in temperature. Apparently they filmed for 27 straight hours, and Edwin Neal, who played the hitchhiker, another member of the family, said this experience was more miserable than his service in Vietnam. It must have really been hell, but it also added a lot to the performances you see in that scene. Without giving it away, the way the film ends is another legendary moment in horror movie history and cemented Leatherface as a unique character of cinema. But I think I've said enough for today about one of my all-time favorite horror movies. So in German I'd say, BLUTGERICHT in Texas ist einer der ganz großen Horrorfilm-Klassiker. Die Bilder, die Klangkulisse, die Gewalt, der Terror, eine Rohheit und Atmosphäre, die seinesgleichen suchen. Tobe Hoopers Meisterwerk. I give the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 10 out of 10. It's more like 9.6, but I don't do that. Alright, that's it like always. Comment below and let me know what you think about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And also let me know what is your favorite horror movie of all time. You can hit me up on Twitter, Instagram and Letterboxd simply at TheJimmyCage. And if you enjoyed this episode, please give me a thumbs up, share, subscribe, whatever you like. And make sure you hit that bell for all I have to tell.